Hello, I'm Cara, and today I want to start a series that I've been thinking about for a while. That I might circle back through these later in more detail. But essentially, so I have a lot of books, and some of them, like this bookcase, is fiction. So pretty self-explanatory. Mostly things that I want to read, some things that my friends are published in, and things like that. This is nonfiction, so we've got different histories, language textbooks, some religious textbooks because I had a lot of those for a while, and yeah, textbooks from school. I have this bookcase has it has cookbooks, it has craft books. It has photo albums, blank notebooks. I want a bigger. I need to replace these two anyway. So I want a bigger bookcase to replace that. And this one, way over on the end, has mostly environmental books to some, in one way or another. So there are a couple other textbooks. I have like tree and bush books about trees and mushrooms, a lot of Iowa focused books. It's where my Iowa wildflower for different ecosystems books are, and things like that. And down on the bottom I have I'm going to remember to flip this so it's legible, but Yearbook of Agriculture, Yearbooks of Agriculture, that I found a handful of in a used bookstore in Bloomington, called Caveat Emptor. It's still alive. I think ownership has changed. The original, or the owners who had it when I lived there, 2015 to 2017, I either passed or sold it and retired. Anyway, so, and that's one flavor. This is one flavor, the one I think about most, of weird old books that if you you would walk past at a thrift store because they seem so niche, but I am really excited about. So I have some other old Iowa books that I might tell you about in the future. So but first I want to talk about some of these yearbooks of agriculture, and I'm starting with 1955. Because this is one of the handful that I have, as you can see, because it's water. And my undergraduate degree was in environmental science with a focus on hydroscience. I got a master's degree in, I think the department was still the geoscience department. That's what's on my diploma, but it's changing to earth environmental sciences, and I was focused on water and water quality, especially in agricultural ecosystems. And that's also what I was working on in the doctoral program I was in for 2 years in Bloomington, in Indiana, at Indiana University. So, and yes, again, I found these books at Caveat Emptor. This one was originally belonged to the College of St. Thomas Library in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I already think that's interesting. But so that we're starting with water because that's what I studied, but also because this cover is so good. So we've got, abstract ripples, so a kind of block printed reeds on the back. This is very pretty. On the front, we just got a floating cow. So you understand, this is still the Yearbook of Agriculture. It's just there's just water on there, but this cow. We're still talking about agriculture. Anyway. So genuinely, some things about this I find delightful, because they're a little silly or a little cringe, but I appreciate that. And some things I also just find extremely interesting. So again, this is 1955. Ooh, I was going to double check who is the president. I think it's still Eisenhower. Just going to double check, but I can't because I'm talking to you on my phone, and that's what I would look it up on. Anywho, so our first forward, get with the flow. Look, It's a tie-in. It's all connected. It's a theme. Floating cow head over water. This one looks like the cow is bending down to drink. This just looks like a floating cow head. Oh, and it's funny every time. Anyway, so our first foreword is from the then Secretary of Agriculture, who I believe would have been appointed by Eisenhower. Be great if I checked. And he says, he's talking about how water has become a major national concern. They did write one paragraph I really liked. Yeah, in the same, anyway, he says, we need an increased awareness among all Americans of the oneness of our physical resources. Just as many lives make up our one national life, so our agriculture has many parts of a single whole. Water, land, and people are inseparable components of one thing, our welfare. The subject of water can be viewed from the various aspects of soil conservation, agronomy, forestry, irrigation, wildlife, recreation, business, industry, law, and so on, but never alone. So, and this is gets at why I wanted to study water. Like in my undergrad, the first major I declared was international studies, with a focus on China or East Asian studies, I think is what it said, but I studied Chinese and took a lot of East Asian studies classes. Then I lived in China for a year afterwards. Any hoozle. I just kind of wanted to learn about a lot of different things. And then environmental science was kind of a way to learn about a lot of things and have it end up as a science degree. And water was the way to what felt like be the most focused but still all-encompassing, because life on our planet is literally defined by water, right? That's why looking for water or evidence of past water on places like the moon or Mars is such a big deal, and why it gets scientists very excited, because it means the possibility of life. Because water is a weird, chemically a weird substance, a weird molecule, in that, and it's an interesting molecule in a lot of ways, in that it's polar, has a positive charge on one end and a negative charge on the other, with the oxygen, 2 hydrogens, and it does a weird thing where almost every substance gets more dense as it gets colder until it freezes. And water, as you may know, and then continues to get more dense as it freezes, importantly. So water gets more and more dense as it gets colder to a certain point, till about 4 degrees. Oh, I think 4 degrees Celsius. That's another thing, a part of my brain I haven't actively used in a while. But then it gets less dense as ice, which is why ice floats, and why fish and other things can survive on the bottom of lakes and rivers when the top is frozen over, because it doesn't freeze up from the bottom, it freezes down from the top, because ice is floating, and because the air is cold. But anyway, all of that contributes to those are a couple of weird things that are true about water, that are necessary for life as we know it to exist here on planet Earth. So, and it's much more, people who study hydrology and environmental science, remember the people that other students and people I worked with in my doctoral degree had studied relatively pristine, which is a kind of a word that is used with more confidence and given more meaning than it really has. But anyway, I worked in, little forested watersheds, wanted to spend time in forest creeks and learn about them. And and when we talk about how they're master's advisor told them they were foolish for choosing to work on agricultural rivers because they're so ugly in comparison, because our, Midwestern agricultural watersheds are mostly, drainage ditches. They're muddy or grassy or both. They often are quite stinky because of all the waste that gets washed in, all the fertilizers get washed in. Okay, sorry. This is about the book. But it's all related. And in 1955, so this is a book, the Yearbooks of Agriculture were published every year to some extent. I think the first one was just called Report. The first one was in 1862, which is also interesting. It's created by Lincoln. But I have another book I'm going to talk about that with. And yeah, so they chose a theme. So this one was water. There's one here where it was grass. There's some one I can see is food. There's one that's kind of about globalization. I'll grab one on farm management. Like, they just kind of chose a theme. Sometimes they're relatively specific, sometimes they're extremely broad. And so this is my jam for a number of reasons. Not that I've read all of it, but gosh, do I like looking at the table of contents. So we have a few people writing on, okay, so the main headers, the main topics, they break this up into are our need for water, which is like, a big topic that seems obvious, but also is worth writing about in a bit more specificity from different perspectives. So the first chapter essay here is the story of water is the story of man. There's one called Animals, Fowls, and Water, and one, the needs and uses of water by plants. One's water and microorganisms, and one is trends in the utilization of water. So different ways that water is used and needed. The next section is where we get our water. So talking about the water cycle, talking about, evaporation and formation of clouds and then rain. Surface water, which is, connected to that rain cycle largely. Underground sources of water, how we measure different things, which is quite tricky. We've gotten better, but it is still actually extremely hard to measure rain. Not because, if you have a good high quality rain gauge, and rain gauges are something that I worked with in undergrad, and then again when I moved back from Korea before I started grad school, I worked on taking care of rain gauges. So a good quality rain gauge is big and obnoxious and not what you need for any home, right? So the little cylinders are going to be a bit inaccurate, but close enough. Things that you can have that they sell at department stores that you can put it, or garden stores that you can put in the backyard. It's going to be slightly inaccurate, but good enough, close, very close, good enough for what you need to know about your house. But one of the things that's really difficult is that, we'll say we got, there's rain, report on rain from yesterday, and say we got an inch of rain or 1.2 inches of rain. And that's generally, been worked on by the National Weather Service. And it's also a good meaningful number, they do collect a lot of data, but the amount of rainfall is extremely variable in absolutely every rainstorm. You might get a front coming through where there's quite a bit of rain all at once along an area, but even then it'll be heavier, and you'll end up, if you actually look, there's rainfall maps you can look at on IFIS, the Iowa Flood Information System that the Iowa Flood Center maintains. And it looks like a topographic map, basically, with all these, areas of high concentration and low concentration all over the place. So it seems like a simple thing, but like everything, that you learn about, on an elementary school level, it's more complicated once you get into it. And this is the nerdy thing that I think is exciting. So, yes. So then our other sections got water and our soil, which is a big deal. Like this could be there could be easily a whole book of research on this. Even that I think that would be interesting to relatively lay people who work either in agriculture or live rurally, because there's so much. We erode so much soil with the way that we do agriculture right now. But I do want to say, like, I'm in Iowa, so there's a lot of money in agriculture. Hello, ma'am. You can come hang out if you want, but I'm going to keep talking. And that is often very frustrating. Like right now, our state legislature is putting through legislation to shield agricultural companies and chemical companies, which in Iowa, chemical companies means agriculture mostly. I mean, pesticides and fertilizers and herbicides and stuff. Yeah, poisons and nutrients that we put on that are sprayed onto our soil in large quantities. But legislation is being passed to shield those companies from responsibility for cancers caused by their chemicals, which sucks. But I do think and especially the way that a lot of people vote and different things, it's easy for people like me. I grew up in a college town. I have degrees, but I have not ever lived and worked on a farm. It's easy for people like me to conflate big agriculture with individual farmers. Sometimes that's meaningful and fair, partially when it comes to votes, but when it comes to lived experience, not at all. Like a lot of farmers are really, frustrated by changing legislation that means they have to invest in whole different equipment and their how they're required to do what they've done their whole lives changes, and that can be frustrating. And it's often, a lot of the changes make sense, or can make sense to me, but some of the things that have been imposed on them from the government have not been good. So it's not, that was a long, kind of messy explanation, but farmers and big ag are not the same thing. I am aware of that. Okay. So the next one is called Caring for Our Watersheds, which is like, I need to start. I've been stuck in this place where like I have a lot of things that I want to talk about, but I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job. So I put it off, and then I have a book of notes. Where are you? I have a book. Oop, there you are. That I collaged on. I have a bunch of notes about agriculture and different things. But I haven't been putting it together in essays or videos because my ADHD brain won't let me start, and then I just feel bad for not having started, and then I don't. But when I actually, talk about watersheds for so long. So this has a bunch of different things about floods and conservation and just watershed management, which is a really important scale, I guess, of management to think about, and one that we're not used to, especially, in the Midwest with our square counties and mostly rectangular states. But we've got water in our forests, water for irrigation, water in our crops, and those are not the same. Like Iowa, there's very little irrigation. Partially the amount of rainfall you get in a year just determines what kinds of crops you can grow. And then in some areas you need irrigation for the type of agriculture we want to do right now, basically no matter what you're doing. So ranges and pastures, so animal, livestock, gardens, turfs, and orchards, drainage of fields, and that is like Iowa, the practice. Like Iowa is the most highly altered landscape on the planet, the state of Iowa. So it is the most changed from its original ecosystem, which had been managed, for thousands of years by indigenous people here. And then white settlers, white European settlers came, and we completely changed, dug up all the prairies and have been letting huge amounts of soil erode forever. But anyway, and drainage, especially in north central Iowa, where I was born and grew up in Ames, where so it's the flattest part of the state because we had the most recent glaciation, the most recent glacier about 10,000 years ago. So it just kind of flattens it out, and flattens it out coming and going because it's dropping sediment on its way out as well as scraping away. So originally it was a lot of wetlands, as was quite a bit of Iowa and the northern tallgrass prairie in general. But there's such a high density of drainage tiles, which are just PVC, or originally were like ceramic, like brick tubes put in. I'm going to show you a thing in a second, to pull down the water level so there'd be enough room for plant roots like corn especially, to grow without being flooded. Okay, and then we do have a section on water and our wildlife, pure water for farms and cities, and then a look to the future. And I'm not gonna, let's look at a couple of these plates. We have a section of plates on how water can be majestic and happy. This is happy water, apparently. It can be pleasant, life-giving and purifying. So this is 1950s, there are too many tangents to go on. This is 1950s America. So there's a lot of things, a lot that could be said by me and especially by a lot of other people on what does and doesn't get photographed for a government issued book. But anyway, so we're also still talking about water. Water can be productive and powerful. So there's a hydroelectric dam in the 1950s. I think you just tell me which one. Okay. And then we've got, other pictures which take a longer time to explain and are not as interesting, but they sure are here. Gullies and managed channels and waterways. Okay. And I love just every textbook image that has to do with water, groundwater, anything. I love it. So let's see, what was our second set of plates? I think it was not as whimsical. Oh yeah, but we do have some great, so NRCS, soil conservation engineers posing for a thoughtful photo. I would love to know how silly they felt about posing for that. But I appreciate that they did. And building dams, like not natural, but soil and vegetated dams in fields so that water is slowed down. Because really the only effective flood management has to take part on extremely small scales. Like it has to be on every tiny watershed all through the system, because otherwise it's so easy for something to just build up, like storms timed the wrong way to just build up more and more downstream, as has happened a few times in my lifetime. Anyway, okay, and then just so you know that I am extremely nerdy, actually my favorite part of this whole book is the appendix, because we've got these great diagrams. Let's see, these are pumps for moving water, for different things. Okay, here's a great I love these hand-drawn images of drainage tiles. So this looks like PVC. I don't know at 1955 if it would have been that or tile. It's white, so it looks like PVC to me, but I don't know. That would have been the best way to draw them. Well, actually, I don't know. These joints, I don't know if you can see it. The regular joints actually look a lot like what ceramic tiles, so they look like bricks, but they end up being in sections like that because you can't fire ceramics nearly as long as you can make plastic. So we've got diagrams of different types of drainage, bedding, and it doesn't even, I just love these earnest, okay, yeah, so this is kind of the best, actually like that's useful for me to look at immediately, representation of the purpose of tile drains. So this is undrained soil, and this, so they're showing the spring and summer. In the spring, the water level, we get most of our rain and also snow melt in the spring, so the water level is very high, and that limits the growth of roots. And this is corn, obviously, because that's what our agriculture is based around, basically in the Midwest. Other areas of the country, it's different. And so then in summer, you only get a bit more growth because the growth of the roots has been limited, and the plant doesn't take advantage of all of the space because it wasn't here. That space wasn't there when it was trying to grow roots. So then a drainage tile adds this pipe in the soil, and it drains out into generally, a stream or a channel of some kind, ditch, and pulls down the water level, like a drain in a sink or a bathtub. It pulls it down to whatever level. So I guess better to think about the emergency spill, kind of, not emergency, but there's usually a hole on the side, there's one on the side of my bathroom sink to make sure that I guess, if we left the taps on and the sink plugged up, the sink could only fill to that level, and then it would start draining out. So that's kind of what these drainage tiles do. They pull the water down to that level. So this is the updated spring and summer water level, and we get big beautiful corn roots as a result. Yes, there are a lot of okay. This is a diagram of the impact of more moisture on one axis and more nitrogen on the other on yield of seed cotton in Yuma, Arizona. But I just love this hand-drawn 3D bar graph. I just love it. Anyway, I love all the nerds. I mean, this is important work. Think about agricultural management is thinking about how we feed people, right? So it's important, but I also just love thinking about all the earnest nerds doing these calculations and making these hand-drawn graphs. Anywho, so that's an overview. That went longer, of course, than I meant it to, but we're still under half an hour. So on this first Yearbook of Agriculture in my collection of 1955, they stopped, the last little rant I'll go on, is that they stopped, the last year that these were published was 1992. We stopped after that because in 93, so Clinton, to reduce waste and reduce redundant reports, reduce things being printed that didn't necessarily need to be. I don't like it. I think this is a useful project to have in mind. Hello. I just accidentally pushed stop while I was excitedly showing you a diagram. So I'm just going to add this on at the end to say thank you, and I will I'll talk more about weird books that I own soon. Okay, thanks. Hello. I just accidentally pushed stop while I was excitedly showing you a diagram. So I'm just going to add this on at the end to say thank you, and I will I'll talk more about weird books that I own soon. Okay.